Welcome back for our next radiology session. Thank you. And I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Ron Jones. He's a 2019 nominee for Most Effective Radiology Administrator by AntMany.com, one of 12 finalists nationwide. Ron is a healthcare leader, change agent with 20 plus years of experience in radiology, laboratory, and other ancillary hospital departments. He enjoys sharing 90-minute lectures on efficiency models for leading organizations and methodologies and for identifying and preventing employee burnout across the country. So Dr. Ron Jones, come up. Sorry for being a little bit rusty there.
Thanks, sir. Hello. Welcome to Twin Cornerstones in Radiology, and welcome to New Orleans. I can tell you it's a little bit of a drive for me. I actually drove here from southern Idaho. And you may be asking yourself, why would anybody drive from southern Idaho to New Orleans? And I can tell you, absolutely because I have 6 daughters. And driving for a few days in the car in complete peace and solitude is hard to come by. So it was a very nice drive. I enjoyed it. And happy to be here in New Orleans. Happy to be back in some heat. I think we were on our 15th winter in Twin Falls, Idaho. It would get to 70 or 80 degrees for one day, and it would literally snow the next day. So happy to be here. I have been asked by HCP to take a couple of different talks. Really, my purpose for being here is I have 20-something years experience in radiology. You guys have a lot of experience in radiology. And I think the symbiotic relationship is when we all share what we know. And so I'm bringing a couple topics that I've done a lot of research on to share with you and hopefully give you some tools that will help you to manage your staff and your departments more efficiently. And so the 2 talks typically are their own talks. There's a burnout talk. There's a lot going on in the world of burnout. And there's leadership standard work, which there's more about strategic management and some tools you can use to do that. But I've been asked to combine the 2, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. The typical financial disclosures. I am the owner of the Radiologic Technologist.com blog. I do receive an honorarium for seminars, including this one. I receive financial compensation for teaching radiology administration courses at MTMI. And non-financial, I'm a non-salaried board member for Pima Medical Institute for their board on the bachelor's degree for a radiologic technology program. I'm going to start off with a story about the cowboy and the preacher. I think it's kind of apropos for cramming 2 talks into one. Long time ago, back in the early Western days, there was a very famous preacher who would show up in a town and set up his tent, and he'd give a revival that would just pack the house. The whole town would show up, everybody would get inspired, and so this preacher rolls into a particular town. It's about 7:30 in the evening, he sets up his tent, he gets up on stage, and he realizes there's nobody there. About 15 minutes goes by, and he's looking around, crickets, still nobody there. He's starting to get a little concerned. Another 15 minutes goes by, it's now 8 o'clock, and there's nobody in the tent. And he's going, what is with this town? Finally, one lone cowboy wanders up outside, ties his horse up, comes in, grabs a bench and sits down. And the preacher thinks to himself, what am I going to do? I've got this whole sermon prepared. There's only one cowboy here. I should go down and chat with this guy. So he goes down and he says to the cowboy, he says, cowboy, I'm the preacher. And I'm used to preaching to a full house, but as you can see, you're the only one that showed up, and I'm not really quite sure what to do. And the cowboy looks at him and he says, well, I'm not a preacher, I'm just a cowboy. But I can tell you as a cowboy, if I went out to feed my cattle and only one showed up, I'd at least feed him. So the preacher says, all right, okay, you're right. I've got a great topic. I've got a great thing to share. I'm going to get up there. He gets up on stage. He starts to give his sermon. He feels the spirit. He's really knocking it out of the park. He goes for an hour. That's his typical time frame. He's feeling so good. He goes another 15 minutes. It's really with him. He's really getting into it. He's feeling the spirit. He goes another 15 minutes, finally an hour, 45 minutes, he stops, takes his bow, ends his deal, and he goes down. He says, well, cowboy, what do you think? And the cowboy said, well, I'm not a preacher. I'm just a cowboy. But I can tell you, as a cowboy, if I went out to feed my cattle and one showed up, I'd feed him, but I wouldn't dump the whole load on him. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. I'm going to try not to dump the whole load on you with these two talks in a 60-minute period. I'm going to go a little fast. I'm going to take Q&A at the end. I'm happy to connect afterwards offline on the side to answer any more questions, because I do have other tools associated with some of this that you might be interested in. You can email me. I can send those out to you. So just a quick, who is this guy standing in front of you? I've been in radiology since about 2003. Before that, I was in the lab for about 10 years. I used to be a vampire. That's what they always asked you when you're a phlebotomist and you walk in the room. Are you the vampire? I've never heard that one. But I realized over time that when I would show up in patients' rooms at 4 o'clock in the morning to draw their blood, they just weren't exactly excited to see me for some reason. And over time, I decided to try and find something else that might be a little more exciting for me to do, and that's what got me into the world of x-ray. So you can see on the screen over time, I went through x-ray school and learned CT, and then I went back to school for ultrasound, then I learned MRI. That led me into a clinical manager position at a level 1 trauma up in Flagstaff, and onto a system director, which is part of what you heard about. I was nominated at Mini. I got Employee of the Year at my system. I got promoted to a system level Center of Excellence position, they called it, and finally got my doctorate just last July. So kind of accomplished all those things at 2021, and here I am. So let's just get started. Again, burnout, you've all heard it. It was actually, there was tons of talks about burnout before COVID, and some of the numbers that I've listed there are that pre-COVID, if you did a search on scholar.google.com, there was about 13,000, 14,000 articles about burnout because it was a regular discussion. In the 2 years since COVID, half of that amount has come out again. Another 7,000 articles have come out just in the past 2 years because COVID has had such a profound impact on employee and radiologist burnout. I acknowledge radiologist burnout, but there's already a ton of articles out there. What I'm here to talk about is technologist burnout, and that's what impacts us as radiology administrators. So that's what we're going to discuss. Now, what's going on with burnout? You've got all kinds of things attached to it, right? You've got there's always I'm not paid enough, right? I'm going to go work somewhere else for more money. You'll never hear a technologist say, boy, am I overpaid for this job, right? Then you got us on the other side as administrators, always being asked to do more with less. We're always being asked to squeeze a little bit more out of there. Can you run that department with, well, you know, I know you just lost a tech, but can you keep running it without hiring somebody new? You got the boomers retiring, the older generation, they're heading out the door, waving happily, leaving us a little more short-staffed. You got rad tech schools that are really kind of cornered on how many technologists or students they can graduate in their 2-year cycle. I have approached them in the past, these schools, and said, can't you give me more? I need more techs. And they're actually kind of harangued by different regulations that say they can only put out so many techs based on how many jobs are available in the environment, how much help they get from the government, financial aid, that kind of thing. And then, of course, COVID has really affected what's going on. So I took the opportunity. I have a blog, the Radiologic Technologist.com, and a Facebook group for the same thing. And over the years, we've got 5,000 plus members on the Facebook group. I encourage you to go there if you're interested. What I like it for is it allows me as an administrator to keep my finger on the pulse of what these technologists are saying outside of work. And they're saying everything. And it's all right there in this public group. But I went there a few years back and I posted a poll. And I said, if you have experienced burnout or think you are experiencing burnout, share with me what the cause is or was. And through a couple of polls strategically placed, I've got thousands of responses from several thousands of technologists out there. and started to form an article based on those responses. And I took those responses, put them in a spreadsheet, and I came up with about 13 different causes. Now, that's not an all-inclusive list. There's always going to be new things added that cause burnout. But I found 13 general categories, and then I sat down with those 13 categories, and I tried to figure out how could we reverse these? How could we eliminate, alleviate, make it not so bad? And that's what the first half of this talk is about. And so this is just an example of when I post a question, all the people, all those blue squares and circles, that's where I've blacked out the people's faces and names so they're protected anonymously. But those are all the responses everybody starts throwing around about the things that are happening at their work and what they're seeing. The 13 causes I'll just share with you real quick, and then we're going to go through them one at a time rather quickly. There's inadequate personnel, the classic understaffing. I mean, really, that's not even only for healthcare. That's everywhere, right? I mean, you go through you try to go to your favorite restaurant, and they're not open past 6 p.m. because they don't have enough staff. I mean, this staffing issue has really come to a crescendo with the help of COVID. Then number 2, you've got uncontrolled traffic of patients, where you have more patients showing up than you expect. You've got unhealthy rad tech lifestyle, and that can mean a lot of things. I typically think of the third shifters who run on 13 Red Bulls throughout their shift and aren't eating appropriately. You got ambiguity within the job, meaning they're not quite sure what they're supposed to be doing. If I'm a technologist and I'm supposed to be scanning as fast as I can, how come you keep handing me a disk to burn every 5 minutes because the patient brought in something from outside the system? Lack of proper training and orientation. You got to have a good onboarding system. We'll talk about that. An unhealthy work environment. There's different personality traits that can affect our staff. You get type A versus type B. Inappropriate equipment can sometimes be the issue. Ineffective leadership, that never happens. Trauma cases, that's something we don't talk much about. They don't teach it in school. But if you're working at a level 1 trauma, you can see some really serious stuff that can affect you for a long time, even a lifetime. And we've got to learn how to debrief and deal with that appropriately. Ergonomics are always an issue, especially for our sonographers out there. I'm a big proponent of Hoyer lifts. We'll talk more about that. Profitability, driving workflow, we never see that in the workplace. And expanded work duties, hello, multimodality technologists. So we'll jump into these. When you talk about inadequate personnel or just being understaffed, obviously that's going to create a sense of burnout, and what you may not realize is directly affected is your patient care. And so you really should be paying attention to your metrics, especially your turnaround times and your patient satisfaction scores, as well as your employee satisfaction. And you can start to see the shift from when you're adequately staffed and things are going well, and then all of a sudden you're not adequately staffed and you start to see increased turnaround times, decreased patient satisfaction. That may be your cue to start looking at your staffing model. Try to promote with the technologist that it's their job to take care of the patient, because if the patient's not taken care of, that's the thing that undermines the whole purpose. We want happy patients, and to get happy patients, we have to have happy staff. And so that's what we're talking about today, is how to keep staff happy. So take the time with each patient to perform the proper patient care. Unusually high patient volumes can lead to a lot of mistakes. It can lead to increased wait times, obviously unhappy staff, and unsatisfying patient care. So I have found over the years that some of the best places to pull standards and baselines from is we used Health Trust Plus for a little while, but Advisory Board is also another tool out there that you can use. They have metrics, and we'll talk about metrics in the second half, but they have metrics on, there are thousands. I was in charge of putting together an MRI workspace to follow metrics, and there are thousands of metrics that can be tracked. And the new EMRs that we're using these days are just amazing at doing that. But if you need help with metrics, seek that out. Go to Advisory Board or See if you got somebody else in your system that's already got that nailed down. Watch your physicians' vacations and schedules. We had outpatient locations where the doctors tended to like to take hunting season off. Hello, Idaho. And then all of a sudden we'd have no patients. And so we learned to start getting ahead of that by getting their physician schedules ahead of time and staffing those clinics appropriately based on when the physicians would and would not be in the clinic. Double booking got real popular a while back. I don't know that there's still a lot of that going on, but to some people that seems like a good idea. Let's double book so that the patient doesn't show up. We got another patient ready to go, but as soon as they both show up, now you're behind the whole rest of the day, and that affects everybody. And again, I'm putting in there about burning the discs. You really should have technologists doing technologist duties. That's what they went to school for. That's what you're paying them for. If you're having them stop and burn discs that secretarial staff can do, or when I worked in Flagstaff, I had two CT scanners fully capable of knocking out scans quickly, but because we didn't have transport helping get patients from the emergency department to the radiology department, one of my CT techs was playing transport, and one of the CT scanners was never used. So you have to make sure that everybody's doing what they're trained to do and meant to do to keep your productivity up. Otherwise, you've got unhappy staff doing things that they didn't think that they should be doing. Unhealthy lifestyles, we joke about the pizza, but a lot of times we're so busy, we don't get time to go get something to eat. We eat whatever's on our desk, or we eat whatever's at our station. Over time, we start to maybe get a little bit more sedentary than we should be. Modalities like MRI, where you're at the console a lot, ultrasound, where you're in the chair a lot, CT's up and down, x-rays all over the place. Nuke med, is fairly stationary. A lot of different departments kind of vary on that, but you got to keep your eye on the night shift and how they're doing and how their productivity is going. And watch out for those techs that are relying on the Red Bulls and the Monsters. I had a CT tech that couldn't get through a night if he didn't have about 13 of those Red Bulls. And I was really concerned about that guy. He was a younger guy. We had several talks. I don't know if they did any good, but these are all things to keep your eye on. Make sure that you allow them to use their PTO when they need to recharge. Offer better food options in your department, if possible. Work with your nutrition head to offer healthy shakes or something down in the cafeteria. And consider positive rewards, gym memberships, things like that can increase their overall health. Unhealthy RadTech lifestyles. Oh, that's a duplicate title right there. So this is about vagueness. It's about having vagueness in your job. If a tech doesn't know what it is they're supposed to be doing, it's going to cause ambiguity and unsatisfaction or dissatisfaction, and it'll give them a feel like they're not quite fully in control of what they're supposed to be doing, or they may be doing things they maybe don't necessarily need to be doing, and then they feel like they're not getting the recognition for all that they do. Captain Obvious there says set clear expectations so you stay out of vagueness. There's the old added see one, do one, teach one to make sure everybody knows what we're supposed to be doing. You can rotate the lead position or a supervisor position or different types of positions within the department to give everybody a chance to walk in the shoes of another technologist, and then encourage them to learn more about the industry, whether it be magazines or Ant Mini or different things like that. And then you've got to kind of watch the proper training, and by that I mean, did they learn how to do the exams correctly from the schools that they came from? Hopefully you're able to hire students that did their clinical rotation at your location, but that's not always possible. So you've got to be sure that they have the appropriate competency level, and I've listed on there, use an established competency list. I like the Donna Wright model. If you haven't heard of that, WRIGHT. The Donna Wright model has a whole competency program. We have a in-house educator that goes through that with every technologist. It's a way of making sure that people stay competent in all the exams that we hired them to do, because they don't always do all of them. Sometimes they get cornered, or you even have technologists that are happy to take the trauma pager. That's kind of old language. We don't really have pagers anymore, do we? But they would always volunteer to take the level 1 stuff because it's exciting. It's adrenaline. Well, then they'd get less exams that you get on an outpatient basis. So the use of a competency list will help you to stay on top of proper training, and then make sure you have a good onboarding protocol. I think in this day and age, most do. I still see them in the forums, though, people saying they get hired and just kind of thrown in there. I like the model where you get a week training in the ER, and then a week training in the OR, and then a week just in the general department, kind of handling outpatients and walkie-talkies. And then if you can round out a 4th week with something else, maybe out at the ortho clinic or something like that, a good solid month of getting somebody accustomed to the department it goes a lot farther than hiring somebody and just kind of tossing them in there. Unhealthy work environment. So we got to stay on top of the safety issues. I've had technologists in IR who, I had one particular IR tech who stuck herself twice in a year. She just wasn't quite focused, and she was trying to recap on all the things that we know you're not supposed to do, and that can lead to issues down the road. So you got to stay on top of the work environment. I like to allow for timeouts. Well, we have to have timeouts now for quality control. Audible breaks are usually built into those. Encourage the techs to slow down. Make sure you have all your PPE, and I know that gets hard, especially last year when we didn't know what we were wearing from 1 minute to the next. But make sure you have all that situational awareness. I actually we started doing mock labs. We had a lab built at our facility where they had really expensive mannequins that had blue and red liquid that would pulse through them that we could set up with IVs. They had heartbeats. They had a lot of the things that a patient would have. And we would set up mock labs with a radiologist and a nurse and a couple of techs, and we would run things like contrast reactions, things like that to give them the chance for some muscle memory, if you will, to experience a code or a contrast reaction without a real patient on the table. And it helped to work out some kinks, some bugs, maybe some radiologists who are a little too quiet when they should be leading the show, that kind of thing. So if you have the opportunity to use a mock lab, I highly encourage that. Personality traits are always going to be an issue. What I see a lot and saw in the forums and on the polls, you have your type A personality that as soon as an order is ready, we used to say as soon as it came off the printer, now it's on the screen. But somebody would grab it, go do it, sit back down, wait, another one comes up, grab it, go do it, sit back down. Pretty soon somebody's done 4 or 5 exams while the other person's still sitting there, and some animosity will start to build up. How come I'm doing every exam? Well, because you keep jumping up and grabbing them all. So we've got to start watching the productivity numbers and seeing. I remember when I was a tech, actually, I don't know, 2006, 7, something like that. I was an x-ray tech in Arizona, and I got called into the office, and my director said, I noticed that you're doing a lot of chest x-rays and extremities on the night shift, and your partner's doing a lot of the harder exams like the cross-table lateral hips. And I said, well, actually, I'm the guy holding the leg up in the air while that person's doing the imaging, and then she closes all the exams while I'm off getting the next patient. So I can assure you I'm involved, I'm just not the one closing the exams. But that was a good call out by that director. Hey, how come you're doing all the easy stuff and she's doing all the hard stuff? That's the kind of thing you can keep your eye on. Discuss the appropriate workflow for the department. Be keen to offer additional training to people that you feel like maybe aren't just getting it, aren't just catching on. Inappropriate equipment, I'm sure nobody has that, right? Everybody has all the equipment that they want. Never have to ask for an upgrade because your CFO just throws it at you. But just in case you don't, we know that when we have down equipment, that's downtime, not just for the patients, but also for the techs. It's actually stressful on the techs because they can see the work list backing up while the machine's down. So try to encourage getting out ahead of that. I like to start asking for new equipment around the 10-year mark, start begging around the 12-year mark. Some say that's kind of long, but really, I mean, I have a friend, Dave, who works in California as a director right now, and he's still got a 16-slice GE Lightspeed that's functioning. And so, we like to ask for new stuff around 10 years, 12 years. Definitely want to replace it around 15. We know it can go longer if we got a good machine, but you really got to do your best to stay ahead of that and not allow things to get too far behind, the best you can, right? I mean, sometimes our hands are tied. And then always, work with your biomed to repair your stuff, QC your stuff. First call's great if your team can come in and take a look at stuff without having to wait for a vendor to come down. Ineffective leadership, this is something that they said in the polls where they just basically would say that they didn't feel like their administration had their backs. It wasn't really anything about management style or anything like that. It was just that whenever the ER would say that a tech wasn't doing their job fast enough, they felt like the administrator would just automatically say, hey, how come you're not going fast enough? Where they'd rather hear, hey, tell me your side of it. And there's actually metrics now, if you're watching your metrics, which again we'll talk about, that show the lapse of time between when it's ordered in the ER and when it gets picked up in your department, and when you get done with the exam and the radiologist reads it, because that's where you're going to see your big time lapses. It's not necessarily how long the tech's taking. Again, I have in there, I'm a big proponent of the ARRT has an online forum. I go in there weekly. There are directors posting questions in there every day with 8 to 10 answers. So if you have a question about something you've never done before and you don't have a mentor or somebody nearby that you can just call, you can post it on there. You can get a ton of answers. And then I actually like Surveymonkey. We have a corporate account, so I can do all kinds of things with it. But Surveymonkey has been around long enough that they have established questionnaires, meaning that these questionnaires have kind of been honed in towards certain industries and have been used enough times that now they have baseline scores. So I'll show you one in a little bit that I did that I use for patients or employee satisfaction. But consider Surveymonkey. It sounds a little simple, but it's a ton of data. Trauma cases without debriefing. I remember my first year out of x-ray school would have been 2005. I was working at Desert Samaritan in Mesa, Arizona, x-ray, and I was sitting in an ER bay with my portable next to 2 young girls that had drowned. And that's still rough. And I sat there for probably a half an hour waiting for somebody to tell me, should I x-ray them or not? Which eventually I was told not to, but the trauma of sitting there knowing, and of course I have daughters and they were the same age, they don't tell you this stuff in x-ray school. And they don't really tell you on the job, especially when you get to a level 1 trauma. You don't know till you know. It's something that we really need to be having a conversation about. We really need to have debriefing sessions for our employees who see these kinds of things, because they can be very detrimental and it can be taken home with them and it can cause issues in the future. So always offer counseling services, gentle reminders in their emails to go see somebody if needed, encourage them to use their PTO if they need some time off, and hopefully you have a certified counselor at your facility to talk about these things. Ergonomics is always going to be an issue because our industry is very physical, lots of pushing, pulling, boosting. Some of us still have carpet that we're pushing portables across and ultrasound machines. And so I remember being in ultrasound school. It was about our 4th week of school. And they said, your work life expectancy is about 4 years. I'm like, wait a minute, I got to go to school for 2 years and then I can only work for 4 years? So, but it's because you've got to pinch that transducer, and then you got to turn it and bend it and try to get to that left kidney and then try to get to that right kidney, and you're constantly pinching and turning. And so you get the tennis elbow, you get the carpal tunnel, lots of those things, and that's just ultrasound. All the modalities have pushing and pulling, and every now and then a patient who's standing at the wall bucky starts to fall and you go to try to catch them, and there goes the lower back. And there's training that can be had before all that that can hopefully alleviate some of it. And there are ergonomic exercise posters that I try to post in every department to remind them to stretch, to do what they can, and always get lifting help. For some reason, night shift always thinks they have to do everything by themselves, and then they complain about doing everything by themselves. They should be encouraged to call for help, lifting help, get somebody from the ER over, get somebody to come help you boost that patient. There's ergonomic floor mats, and then again, the Hoyer lifts. I was fortunate enough to have a employee health department that saw the value of Hoyer lifts and the reductions they would lead to in employee injuries, and so they helped finance putting in a Hoyer lift, about 5 of them in some key locations. So consider that if you don't have them already. Profitability driving workflow, ain't nobody got time for that. We never see that, right? Of course we want to be profitable. We wouldn't be making a salary if we weren't profitable. Everybody understands that. But when you start trying to ratchet up your profitability and stop caring about patient care, you're headed for disaster. So it doesn't hurt to get tech input, especially if obviously I don't have any working experience in mammography. I always get my mammo tech's input on how to best staff or how to best schedule their patients. How long do you need? What's reasonable? Let's be real. How long do you really need to give good, solid patient care and not double booking or try and cram them in there? Always try to praise, of course. I would actually survey my employees, and I always tried to default to gift cards, and I've even got it in here, gift cards. But when I would survey them and I would say, how do you want to be thanked for the job that you do? Unfailingly, they would say, just tell me. Just give me a verbal attaboy and I'll feel great. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they would say. And so I would fade away from all the gift cards that I thought were awesome and round more and thank them more. And that seems to be the standard. They just want to hear it from us. Set realistic volume goals and realize happy techs make happy patients. Finally, the expanded work duties. I think us technologists, we kind of created our own storm years ago when we started off in X-ray and we got the opportunity to cross-train into CT, and we went, yes, I can make more money. I can learn CT. I'll do X-ray and CT. I'll be awesome. And then something comes along and you have the opportunity to learn maybe a third modality. You're like, yes, I'll make even more money. And there's no way they can get rid of me if I know how to do 3 modalities. Before you know it, we have a whole generation of multimodality techs that are going, I can't possibly stay competent in MRI if I'm doing X-rays and CTs all day. Which one do you want me to do? So watch the expanded work duties, and it's not just the multimodality techs. It's like I said earlier, it's asking your mammo techs to burn all the discs. It's all the extra things that maybe you don't even realize till you get somebody from your Lean Six Sigma department to go through and follow a tech for a day and see what it is they're doing all day long. I've done that a couple times and it was really eye-opening. I didn't realize they were having to do that. I didn't realize they were having to do that. So there's another option, but be hesitant to ask them to step outside their boundaries like billing. I've come across situations where techs are being asked to put billing codes when they close out an exam. We don't know anything about billing. We've never been trained on billing. We shouldn't be doing billing. And if we mess that up, then we just did all that work for free because it didn't get billed correctly. So just be careful of the expanded duties. So this is where we're going to round out the burnout and move into leadership standard work. And the segue there is if we take care of the employees, they will take care of the patients. And how do we do that? We do that by listening to the employees and by giving them the tools that they can use to make their job better. Imagine if we could give them the tools that if they saw one of these 13 burnouts headed towards them, they had a tool that helped them stop that and reverse that. So that's what we're going to talk about on leadership standard work. Leadership standard work is a way to identify the tools you need to solve the problem, how to monitor and sustain. A lot of times, I learned this kind of early on. I'd set a goal, I'd hit a goal, I'd say yes, and I'd move on to the next goal, yes. Oh, well, that one fell back off the rails. So I learned that you've got to monitor and sustain after you complete that goal, after you attain that goal. And then along with that comes setting the, oops, I went backwards. Along with that went oversight and accountability. Who is it that's supposed to watch that goal? Who's responsible? Well, if it's in x-ray, it's the x-ray manager. Is it in ultrasound? Maybe it's a lead tech in ultrasound that monitors that one quality project. And then I'm going to give you some real world examples of some of the things that I've identified, how I fixed them, and I've put some of the tools in here. I have others if you're interested. But anytime you're talking about standardization, you kind of have some basics, right? You have to have a vision. You have to have the need to increase the engagement. You have to have skills or the knowledge of how to get it done, the incentives. If they don't know why they're doing it and they lack the incentives, it's going to be a problem. You have to give them the proper resources to have at their disposal to reach the goal, and then a clear, concise action plan on how you're going to get there. And that is what I call the successful formula for standardization. But here's how it plays out if you're missing a piece. So without a vision, you end up with confusion. Without the skills, you have anxiety because they're not sure how am I supposed to do that. Without the incentives, they're going, well, I don't know why we have to do all this. I don't really have the incentive to make the change. Without the resources, you've got frustration. Well, I would do that, but I don't have the thing I need to do that with. Action plan, they're like, well, let's just start tomorrow. No, well, John's not back till Friday. Let's start on Friday when John gets back. You got to have the action plan in place. Simon Sinek was all over YouTube a couple of years ago with his why question, his books. That's always a part of the process is determining the why. Manage your area in a lean and efficient way. Will enable you to identify, prioritize, and solve issues. And we're talking about real time here. We're not talking about in the past. We're talking about real-time solution identification and problem solving. And then there are ways to even make it automatic, which I'll show you, and engage your staff in the process. So I'll give you a warning. Automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency, but automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency, and that's actually from Bill Gates. And for those of you that aren't a fan of Bill Gates, there's also the quote, "An idiot who steals other people's ideas is still an idiot," from Steve Jobs. So, leadership standard work. Identify the structure and tools, identify the appropriate measures for monitoring the department, and then identify and implement some oversight standards. This is where one of my Surveymonkeys came in. I put out a Surveymonkey. It had about 42 questions. And in the small print, the 3,633 organizations had used this survey at their healthcare system. So they were able to give me some baseline. They call it the global benchmark. So on the question, I feel completely satisfied at my work, completely involved at my work. The benchmark, the baseline, was 81.5%. My team scored 60%. So clearly I had identified an issue with employee satisfaction. So I believe I ran this in October of 17, and then I ran it for 2 more quarters and kept track of the scores, which I'll report to you here in a second. This is the tool that I chose to make a huge change in my department. And again, I call it the teamwork board. You call it whatever you want, but the basic premise, a couple of things. One, it has this color-coded system. Everybody's familiar with the stoplight. We know what those colors mean when we see them out in the environment. Same thing here. So there's a board with the 3 color codes related to importance, and then around the board are your key performance indicators. And if you don't have them, I'm sure all of you have them. If you want more, advisory board, or even just Google radiology key performance indicators, there are literally thousands of them out there. Your CFO may have some that they want you to follow, COO, but you should have the KPIs that you're tracking around this board, and I'll get more into that in just a minute. And then the little yellow sticky next to it is kind of like, it was the opportunity, and I do this in my personal life on my phone. Whenever I have an idea, something I want to do later, or something I've forgotten, or something I got to remember, I'll just jot it on my phone, And at the end of the day, I kind of have a recap hour where I go back and look at all these things, because if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. And that's exactly what these yellow slips are for. They're for employees when they're going through their day and they see something that's inefficient. They can grab one of these slips, fill it out real quick, stick it up on that board in the red, and I'll go through this in just a second, but the red is for where the problems start. And it's a way for employees throughout the day to say, I don't like that, it can be done better, here's my thoughts, and they put it up there. And I got a slide explaining how it all breaks down, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You put your name, you put your date, you put what the problem is, and it goes up on the board. I enlarged this one with some KPIs on it just to give you some ideas. So there's staff and patient safety, there's a quality, one for productivity, one for financial performance, something that's department driven, maybe just for your department, maybe your administrator has asked you to focus on some certain metric. And then you can put your department organizational goals or mission statements or whatever up in the corner as a reminder, another department driven, and then some metrics. And I'll show you mine here in just a minute. And then we've all probably heard of the huddle by this point. A huddle just means a short meeting. In this particular case, we use the huddle to gather around the board and choose one of these yellow slips to work on. And I'll get to more of that in just a second. So number 2, select the issue you want to work on, not collect ideas. So to kind of summarize, because I know we're short on time, throughout the week, the employees are encouraged to write down their concerns on the yellow stickies, and they put them up there. And then throughout the week, employees are also encouraged to look at these when they're not busy and come up with thoughts on what they think could be a solution. And on the back side of that, they write their solution on a plain yellow sticky, and they stick it on the back of that note, and they put it back up on the board. So throughout the week, not at the huddle, throughout the week, employees are writing down their concerns, their inefficiencies, and giving feedback on how that can be solved. So that when you have these huddles, that's when you say, okay, here's our 4 tickets in the red. Which 1 or 2 would you guys like to work on this week? As a group, you decide, and then you make your action, and I'll try to get into that here in just a second. So you want to keep these meetings short and quick. This isn't your monthly staff meeting. This is just a quick 15 to 20 minutes, pick something to solve, assign it out to somebody, and move on and get back to work. So once the staff fills one out, they put it on the red board, and when you get together for your huddle, you pick 1 or 2 of them. That's all this slide's trying to say. The red column is used for putting your concerns down on there. Step 2 is as the staff is running around throughout their day, if they have time to stop and look and think of solutions, they put them on the back. And the middle part there, never disregard an idea. Encourage the staff. You may think it's silly, whatever the issue is, you may think it's silly, just write it down anyway, because you never know what's going to pan out. And it's always important to put their name and date, because you can even, if you want to, you can track who's submitting ideas and who's really being involved, because when it comes time for the annual review, maybe you want to thank that employee for coming up with these solutions and helping out with the process. So you can see in the middle of the yellow column, at this point, you've chosen 1 or 2 items to work on. You've assigned out who's going to address this situation. Hey, Bob, we're always running out of gloves in room 2. Bob, why don't you move forward with this, see what you can get done with it. We move it to the yellow in progress. Bob's now in control. His name's on it, and he has a week to figure something out and report back at the next huddle. And you can kind of see where that arrow is pointing. Those are some blue sticky notes on the backside. Those are the people. You can see there's staff doesn't always know it's ready for turnover. Those are the ideas that other people have said and put on the backside. So step 4, when you're done and you've got things completed, it goes in the complete column. And I started to collect mine in a different place I'll show you, but that's the general gist of the teamwork board. Now the huddle agenda is to review your metrics around the board. You quickly point out where we're at on all the metrics, what we need to improve on. And of course, remember, once you reach a goal, there's no need to continue working on it. You move that aside, you pick a new goal, but you still have to monitor the one that you've successfully completed so that it doesn't go off the rails. So any metric posted should have a goal. If you're not hitting the goal, if you're hitting the goals, congratulate. But if you're not, ask the staff why they think we're not hitting the goals. Remember, we're trying to keep the staff more involved for that employee satisfaction. And if the metric doesn't have a goal, ask yourself, why do we even have it up here? Because that'll happen. I threw the safety counter on here just because I think it's a good general KPI. Where I went with this particular system was I slowly went to just a color-coded system because it was easy to identify problems or continue moving on if there weren't any. So in other words, every department had their own safety counter, X-ray, CT, MR, and as I would meet with those supervisors monthly, when we would be meeting to discuss their department, if they pulled out the safety counter and it was all green marks, I knew I didn't have to ask any questions about the safety counter. And I learned to color code some other forms that I have as well, that as you trickle up these reports from your staff to you to your administrator, you get it to a point with this system where you just look at a quick glance and you can say, well, it's all green, we don't need to discuss that, let's move on to the next topic. And you can focus more of your precious time on the areas where you need to be focusing it on. The safety counter, and at the top you got your 3 colors, it calls out what each issue is. If I meet with a supervisor and I see this, I go, oh, something happened on the 18th, you got a red mark, tell me about that. I want to know what that was. I want to know what's being done about that. The safety counter is just a simple visual tool to keep track of safety events. It's another KPI that is available. When it comes to the training, the folks involved in this teamwork concept, you have a facilitator. That's the person that leads the meetings, and they can train new facilitators. They are there to understand what everybody's trying to get across, lead the huddles, and support the improvements. And then the manager or director, whatever it's called at your department or your system, you can also train new facilitators if necessary, but you're more of a role model. You're there to help remove barriers that might be getting in the way. And I'll add at that point that in this process, I discovered that there were some things that we felt like, yes, it's an issue, but it's not solved in our department. It's not solved in imaging. It's an issue outside of imaging that's kind of haranguing us at what we do. And that's okay. What you do is then assign somebody to go talk to a person in that other department and work with them on solving this issue. You don't just say, well, we can't affect that one, so off in the trash it goes. You just reach outside your department and find the person that can help. So the managers or the directors that remove the barriers, they stay close to the front line, they routinely communicate, of course, recognize and celebrate successes all the time and measure and share those improvements. And then your executive, your senior administrator, they're also there to help remove barriers, but they're also there to round and be engaged and be involved, stay as close as to the issues as they can. Also recognize and celebrate, however your system does that, and share improvements to other departments. This was my X-ray department's teamwork board. You can see how many different things are being worked on in the proposed column, how many were in progress. And then down there in the bottom right, that was a little clear folder that we would keep our completed initiatives in as kind of a reminder, look, we're making progress. And that's something, it's interesting. My wife is an X-ray tech as well, and she actually worked at this facility, a couple supervisors removed. But we were talking about this morning, and this system is still in place. This was, I did this about 4 years ago. The system is still in place, and she was telling me, the nice part about that system is you can see your ideas being actively worked on. Where in some situations you may even hear this from your technologist. I've told you a couple times we have this problem with this thing, and nothing ever seems to get done about it. This system is very visual. It allows you to track what's going on. You can see where it's at in the progress, and it makes them feel like it may not be solved yet, but it's being actively worked on. And that goes a long way to making employees feel like they've been heard. You can see my metrics around. You can see my little safety counter up there on the right. And that is my staff. I did not pay them for that picture. That is 39 initiatives that the X-ray department alone completed in 3 months. And that directly affects employee survey questions like, I have a say in what happens in my work environment, or my opinion matters. Whatever the questions are in your survey, those are always in there. So 39 incentives in 3 months. You can't tell me that they didn't feel like they had a say in their job after that. And in fact, my old score was 60%, my new score was 86.1. So I exceeded the global benchmark, I raised employee satisfaction, and we call that a success. Problem solved. I've got about 7 minutes left. I want to try to allow 5 for Q&A, but this is another great tool that I implemented in this same system. You may have heard about it. It's not a new idea. It's called the Kamishibai cards, and it actually looks just like the old time card system for those of us that remember punching into the time cards. These look just like a time card, only the front of it has a green color code, just like everything else, and it's listed with daily duties. It's things like replenishing your bed sheets, refilling your gel bottles, wiping down the room, all those daily things that sometimes fall between the cracks if we don't have a clear understanding of the job. And that was one of the burnout things, was either ambiguity or not having proper training. This tool allowed me to put these little time card deals in each department, and they just kind of had the daily and or nightly duties that needed to be done. And what the tech would do, usually the night shift, whenever they had downtime, they would pull the first card out and it would say, restock the towels or whatever. They would do that, and when they were done, they would take it to the slot on the right side and put it back on that side. So left was, I got to do it, right was, I've already done it. And when the day shift came back in the next day, they would look at it and reset it all back to the needs to be done rack. But the nice part about these is if you flip them over, it's red. Who would have thought? Red means I tried to do this thing and there was a problem. So if they can't do it, they put it over in the done rack, but they flip it over, there's red. So when that person comes in the next morning, or the supervisor who's rounding or whatever, and they see a red card in that, they know to grab that and go talk to that night tech, or if that night tech's gone, they should have given a report out to the day shift on why that's red. And you gotta remove barriers. That's our job, right? So this was a very simple visual system for just kind of getting the daily, keeping the lights on kind of things done. And it gave accountability to the technologist, and it gave the managers, supervisors, that kind of thing, the ability to see that it got done. No longer do they have to round and go check all the linen and all that. They know it's done because there's a green card in there, or there's a red because we're out of towels or something. So the Kamishibai cards were another successful tool that was part of this leadership standard work. Plan to do rack. There's a single point lesson on how it all works, completed rack, and additional info down at the bottom. So I'm going to start to wrap it up. I'm such a radiology nerd. I'm everywhere. I have the Facebook group. I have the blog. I have Instagram. There's a really cool subreddit on Reddit called r/radiology, where a lot of cool cases get posted, a lot of cool questions get asked. I mean, each one of these is a different place where a group of radiology people get together to discuss things. And it's really exciting at this point. I remember going to conferences, 15 years ago, and they would always do the meet and greet early on in the conference. And we'd go to these conferences and we'd walk in, or these meet and greets, and there'd be all the younger people, newer people, kind of just getting into radiology on one side of the room, having the hors d'oeuvres, and on the other side are all these people that have been doing it 20, 30, 40 years on the other side of the room. And I thought, how are we ever going to pass that knowledge on if we can't even get together in the same room to socialize? And that's what I was really hoping social media would bring about, and it is. So there's a YouTube channel that I have 250 videos on, where I just talk about all these kind of things. A lot of it is mentoring students who are having difficulty. COVID, as you all know, was a nightmare on the students. A lot of them were told to go study at home, learn their positioning at home. I became a big advocate of this posable skeleton that Amazon had for $50. I'm like, you guys are gonna have to go grab a skeleton and have it at home, and you're gonna have to use your wife, your husband, whatever. You've got to start learning this stuff. But there's lots of places. I know there were times early on in my director career where I'd be asked to do something new, and I'd be like, I don't know how to do that. Where am I gonna find that out? I'd go to the HRA bundle to get your CRA. It has all that information, or I'd try to go somewhere. Now you can go to the radiology subreddit, you can go to YouTube. There's actually more and more technologists starting their own channels to share their knowledge than ever before. It's fascinating. So I would say if you wanted to get in contact with me, I think I actually left that one off, is through LinkedIn. Just go to LinkedIn, look me up, connect on there, and I have a group on there as well for radiology mentorship, career mentorship. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. Thank you all very much for coming. We got a couple minutes left. I think we have some microphones that can be passed around if there's some questions. Might even be able to get my wife to help pass the mic. It's the first time watching me give a talk. How am I doing? Yeah? I'm glad you said that. I've been talking for, I don't know, 8 years. She's always at home with those 6 daughters, taking care of those 6 daughters. So I got her to come with me this time. It's awesome. So any questions? Those are some bright lights, Andrew. I don't even know where you're over there. Oh. Oof, boy.
Hi, sorry we came in a little late. I didn't catch your name.
My name?
Yeah.
Ron Jones. I don't know if I can go all the way back to the first one. Yeah, it's on my first slide, sorry. Ron Jones.
Great talk, Doctor.
Yeah.
Quick question. Instagram, it's under, what is the title for Instagram for the account?
Oh my gosh. The Rad Tech. Yeah. You know, when all that stuff started coming out, I'm like, yeah, I got to do that. Oh, wait, that's new. I got to do that. Oh, wait, now I'm like, I'm not TikToking. I'm not Snapchatting. I don't even know. My girls are like, Dad. I'm like, no, I'm done. I've got enough. Any other questions? I would check out the Facebook group. It's the top left. The Radiologic Technologist group. There's over 5,000 members on there, and there's probably at least 10 posts a day, people asking questions. I mean, they ask, does anybody know how to do the quality control on a Siemens, whatever, CT scanner? And you think, nobody's going to answer that. And sure enough, 2 hours later, somebody from somewhere says, yeah, here's the website link. Of course, I'm posting Ask Your Vendor. That's their job, right? But people ask all kinds of, maybe a night shift person that has how many seconds do I use for a delay to inject on a CT? I mean, social media has really opened it up for people. I mean, think about when you were a tech and maybe you worked the night shift and you had a question. Unless you had a sister hospital with a tech who would answer the phone when you called, you didn't have anybody to call in the middle of the night. Now you've got places to go. So, any other questions out there? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I appreciate it.